This time out, we're going to look at two features in Squarespace because they're really heavily connected. First up, we're going to look at adding shapes into any section within a Squarespace page. And then once we've done that, we're also going to look at image frames, and I'm going to explain the difference and how we can use them in correlation. So I've got a blank section set up here on this playground page in SquareForge. This is our Squarespace template builder. There's info in the description if you want to find out more. I'm going to click on Add Block in the top left-hand corner, and we can see shapes here. When we click on that, it doesn't give you the option to choose a shape straight away. However, once it's added in, we can change it by going to this pencil option. And then from that edit option, we can choose different shapes. We can see here this is an oval. So if we were to uncheck stretch, it creates it as a perfect circle. We can put badges on, and that's what we're going to do today. We're going to take this shape and we're going to overlay it over top of an image. Because another benefit is we can change the color. So we've got a color palette which is suitably monochromatic with this site. However, we can go and put in a custom color. So this is great if you wanted to put a sale badge on top of an image. Let's just go for that cherry red stroke pink color for that badge. We're going to add in some other shapes as well, just to give you some other options. So again, I'm going to add a rectangle this time, and we can see that we can expand or reduce it to fit the section widths. This means we can have a chunky border off to the left, and say we wanted to put a text block in alongside it. We can, of course, do that. So I'm going to put some placeholder text in place alongside that block. Although it's a bit condensed at the moment, we can start working with this to create unique structures. Reduce the height of that content, get rid of all those extra blocks. One option, I can bring it over one more here, but there's too much of a gap now. And there's another thing that I'm going to do by going into edit section. I'm just going to bring this into the center so I can see it easier. And we can see the gap option here. This handles the spacing in between each of the 24 grid blocks. Squarespace now works on a 24 column grid. If you're used to Squarespace 7.0, the older version, it was actually based on 12 columns. This just gives us a little bit more flexibility to work with. We can see now that we can adjust the gaps in between each of the columns. And of course, we can make it really wide to make it a thinner line. So that's an effect that we can add. But I'm going to go somewhere in between with about 30 pixels. This isn't quite as chunky as it was. And we've got the text block alongside it. Bear in mind, this will affect the whole section. So the grid columns now are much wider across the board. But it will not affect sections like the one above. So it's often just a case of playing around with these features until you get to something that you're happy with. Another thing that might be bugging you, as it is me, is we've got the text all the way to the top here, but not quite because the shape goes right the way to the edge whilst there's a little bit of tiny padding with the text. What I'm going to do here is actually align the content to center. That means we've got almost identical spacing above and below, that just fits together really well. Then we can manipulate the text as we see fit. So let's just trim that down there and maybe put the first sentence in bold. Give it quite a unique look and feel. One thing we find with Squarespace is we can experiment to our heart's content. I really do love the Fluid engine for this type of effect. And of course, we can use shapes for that strong impact that we're after. I could also make this expand one more column. And I'm going to show you a difference with this one compared to the one above. And let's just say we're going to duplicate that shape. And this time, we've got our shape overlapping the text at the moment. And then if we click on the edit, for some reason, the option to bring it to the front or send to the back is missing. I'm going to try it one more time. So we can see when it's overlaying that text, it's working. But for some reason, there's a little bug that it wasn't working for this one. But now with this shape, we can move it to the back. So I've never seen that before. Little Squarespace bug there. You're going to get them. And now we're going to bring this block behind. Again, we can move it back once further. So we've got this section here. And notice how I took the shape right the way underneath it to the left-hand side. We're going to select the shape now and choose a color. Could choose a custom color, or I can just go with the monochromatic palette. I want to try and keep it as consistent as possible. There we go, 2 tab options. And one thing we could do now is take it one step further. So we've adjusted the widths between the cells. Let's take the height to 0. Now you might find that that's a little too compact, but again, we can expand the height to 1 more column to give it some more breathing space. And now we've got a 1-row divide. As this is looking quite compact, what we can do is select all of these elements and bring it down 1 more row, which we use the height of the row now, considering there's no padding in between each of the rows. And that will be the gap between the 2 sections. So this shape is behind this one to give it this accent here on the left-hand side. It's nice and compact, and we've got 2 different formats. Say we settled on this one. We can give it a bit more breathing space by bringing it down 1 more row itself. And then when we are done with that, we check it on mobile, which then gives us the option to duplicate it. And we can keep that effect going through. However, there's one more thing I want to do before I test this on mobile, and that is to go to the button. And I'm going to add the button just slotting off the bottom right-hand corner here. That looks quite heavy compared to the line on the left, so I might do a little bit more tweaking and a little bit more adjusting to get it right. First of all, I'm going to give it a bit more breathing space in the block above, and maybe change this to match the color as well. So balance out the weighting of that section so we can see the line on the left and now the button below. Yeah, much happy with that. Maybe make it a bit narrower there as well. Depends on the text that's going in that button. But I think that's a format that I'm quite happy with. Before we go on and edit the images, I'm just going to get rid of this section here. I'm going to select all of them and bring them back up to the container, to the top of the container. And once I've got it there, I'm going to switch to mobile view. And as we can see, it's broken. That's absolutely fine. We were expecting this, honestly. And now we can bring the text. Again, you might have to bring it to the front. And this is where we can adjust it independently on mobile view to get it as we want. So now lots of nice breathing space. We've got the button there. We could alternatively choose to align it to the center. I'd like some consistency between this version and the one on desktop. Of course, we've got the line going across the top here as opposed to on the left. It might be a little bit chunky on the left-hand side. No, in fact, that looks okay. So this is just an alternative option that we've got. With that line on the left and the button below. Having looked at both options, I think I'm happy with that one. So now let's jump back to desktop mode, and it shouldn't have changed it. So what this means now is we can duplicate this, change the content in each block, and maybe that will go for 3 different blocks. There we go. 1, 2, 3. If I go back to mobile, it still might not be perfect, but we can see these blocks are positioned correctly, and now we know that these buttons are in the right place. Sometimes if we don't check it on mobile first, it will reorder these buttons randomly, and you can end up with a lot of organizing to get it back to what you want it to be. Whilst in this case, all we're doing now is just adjusting the spacing in between each of those blocks. Finally, then, to wrap up, I'm going to have a chapter dedicated to using image blocks in Squarespace. In fact, I've already created one for image blocks, but what I'd like to do is create one with image frames. But I'm just going to drop an image in here from our existing library. Let's go with this one. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. And I'm going to go back into this option here, go to design, and we've got the shape option for our image. So whereas we used to have to upload transparent PNGs with the backgrounds transparent to get it to work in shapes like this, Squarespace now uses CSS frames to do all of this on the platform, which just makes our job that much easier. And there we go. We can put our shape now interacting with our image to create another unique bespoke effect. I really do like playing around with the Fluid Engine. It's just a nice experience, and it allows us to do so much with our designs without having to enter a single line of code. I suppose if you're a developer, you may not like this so much. I get it. What we're finding is more and more web designers moving across to this type of approach. So I'm just going to put a sail badge in here. And this time we can use the expand text to fill the frame option. And what I'm going to do now is cheat a little bit. I'm going to put it as a square frame in here. That's the only way I can get it to line to the center, pretty much across the board, and then change the alignment here. And we can change that text to bold. And of course, we can go in and change the color of this text as well. Let's put that as white. There we go. Shapes as background for text, which can create some really nice grid and block structures. We've also got the option now to put a dynamic sail badge onto the pages without having to upload it as an extra graphic, which is faster loading, and it gives us more customization. When I jump back to mobile, I can quickly change this section. That's quite a nice effect, cut effect, accidental. By adjusting the text block so it fills the frame, we don't have to worry about text sizes or anything like that. And it's very much the case now of getting it to fit right on mobile view. So by just expanding that, that's helped a little bit. Problem I've got now is by reducing those left and right, the text is a bit smaller, but it's a little bit of a trade-off we have to make. And then we can decide where that badge is going to go. The reason that's gone off-center is because this badge is now moved off the left of the screen. So I think that's what we're going to settle on. Finally, a little bit of fine-tuning. But there we have it. A whole new section that I might well add this to the SquareForge as another template to work on. If you're intrigued about learning more about some of these advanced effects that we can create using Squarespace by playing around with the Fluid Engine, we have both free and paid communities depending on the level of support you need over on School with a K. I recommend going to check them out. Information in the description. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.